WCCS AM 1160, 101.1 FM. Sorry for the delay. I was getting Bob's story of his near-death experience from earlier this week. Good to see you,
Hey, good
especially
morning.
after that story.
Good morning.
You can call Bob if you have a question. 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227. And here we are at the beginning of March.
Yes, we are.
We look for milestones in the month of March because this is really a transition month, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah, lots of things.
And we'll have to move the clocks ahead.
That happens this weekend.
It does.
That happens this weekend. We'll be looking at things like getting out and that annual pruning of the grapevines. I can't wait. A little early for that just yet.
Yep. We're still a little chilly.
What are some
but
of
that'll turn.
Some of the other things that we'll be looking for in the month of March?
So a lot of pruning can be done during this month and then into April, especially on apple trees, those fruit-bearing trees. Not so much on the peach trees, or if you have some of those, it's best to wait, get through the worst of winter into early spring. We can actually have them leaf out a little bit, especially after this winter when we did have some pretty single-digit temperatures that you might just want to wait that out. And it'll make it easier to tell what might have died, because we could get some branch tip death and some bud death. And so just by waiting until those leaves start to emerge, it's a little easier to tell what's actually living and what's not. Especially with the coloration of the peach wood really has a kind of a reddish-purple growth on that newest growth from last year and even the year before that. So sometimes it can be hard. It can start to die or die back, and it'll not change color much, and it can be a little tricky to tell what's living and not.
Okay.
Without really getting up close and looking at the buds and feeling the buds and
all of those
that.
things that you were talking about last week.
Yeah, so you can delay that a bit, and that'll help make it easier.
Okay, some of the things that we look for in the month of March, of course, grass will begin to green up at some point.
Yes.
During this month. And by the end of this month, we'll be out pushing mowers, won't we?
Maybe.
Right now, we're assessing the damage from the winter because
That's right.
snow's starting to disappear, so we see things like mole mountains and things of that nature.
And you might have a lot more cleanup to do. We've had a lot of wind, caused a lot of damage, and so you may have more cleanup to do with down branches and little things like that. And,
I took
and
4
leaves.
carts off of the lawn last week.
Did you? I believe it.
Yeah, 4 carts of broken down limbs and branches off the trees.
You may need to be doing some more preventative maintenance rather than reactive maintenance.
What's left to prevent?
Maybe it's all gone now.
Hey, I wanted to ask you this question this week. I thought of this, and as I was looking at the reports of downed trees on lines and things of that nature, we know that the emerald ash borer has caused tremendous amounts of damage and problems for our power companies. That's why we've had so many power outages, is because those trees can't stand up anymore. Once the wind comes along, it knocks them down on the lines, and that causes problems. Long term, the emerald ash borer has done so much damage so far. Does it settle down here in this area and just keep looking for more ash trees? Does it say, I'm going to try something else since I'm in the neighborhood, or does it move away to another area where there's more healthy ash tree population?
Well, it definitely moves, because that's its pretty much sole source of life.
It only likes that tree.
Yes. So it's very specific, and it's a good thing that it is. So it's one of those that's specific, as opposed to like the brown marmorated stink bug, another invasive insect, can survive in a lot of different habitats, more adaptable, a little more cosmopolitan on the types and number of plants that it will.
That's a bigger diet.
Yeah. But even with that, we've seen ebbs. It came in and there really wasn't much to attack it or keep it in check, and now we're finding that, it's not as bad as it originally was. It's those populations are not ballooning up. So obviously there are things out there in the environment that are beginning to attack it and keep it in check, and so we might have flare-ups here and there, but it's not as bad as it was. So I think a lot of times with some of these, the gypsy moth, it came through and just was really hit the oaks in particular very hard. So it went through. We had a few years, maybe longer in spots where it was really devastating, multiple defoliations on oak trees. A lot of those oak trees then died, and now we don't hardly see it. We'll have a flare-up here or there where there's maybe a pocket where it is able to increase in population unchecked, but then there are some other predators and things that will attack it, and there are some funguses that go with that population, and then when they flare up and the conditions get right, they can overcome the gypsy moth, knock it back.
All right. So we look at those long-term things and we wonder, well, what sort of damage is this for the long future, let alone the near future?
Right. So you lose. Unfortunately, we didn't lose all the oaks with the gypsy moth.
Yeah.
We lost some, but fortunately the tides ebbed on that for now. The ash trees, there's not many left, and there's probably enough of a population left that they can, if one resprouts or it missed one, that may become more of a target later on.
Yeah.
If there's still enough of the population around to attack it.
Okay.
Because there are ones that were protected. I mean, people were able to protect. They might have had one or two trees in their yard, and so they treated that. They got ahead of it, and so it survived.
Yeah.
So they just have to monitor that and make sure that stays that way.
Here's something else I wanted to ask you about today, and this comes out of the Tribune Review article earlier this week, and you saw it. I'm sure the cicadas
yes.
for this year and for this neighborhood are cicadas. Is it our time?
It's our time. Brood 8. Brood 8.
Brood 8.
Yeah.
Okay, that's who's going to get us.
So there are multiple different populations you could say, and they're not all timed at the same time. So they've adapted. So they're on a different 17-year cycle. There's some broods that are in a 13-year cycle, and of course we have a few annual ones that typically will hear that characteristic sound every year.
But here comes Brood 8.
But here comes Brood 8, which is fairly large, covers pretty much all of southwest Pennsylvania and even a little bit into northwest Pennsylvania, getting into Butler and Lawrence, and I think even Clarion is in our group here. So a lot of counties. So we'll see how, and it won't be consistent or even throughout all of those, because the last couple of years there was an earlier brood that was down in that parts of Westmoreland and into Washington and a little bit of Allegheny County like 2 years ago, and there was another one that was in that vicinity last year, and now it's a more broader, larger group.
Okay, so they're going to be coming out about when?
Towards the end of May.
End of May.
And fortunately, so those will emerge from the ground. So the young of the cicadas they suck the fluids out of the roots. So they feed on the roots for that entire period of time.
The roots of what?
The trees.
Okay. Trees
and shrubs. I don't think they fully know, how much damage that causes, or if you have a big population under a tree, well, how much sap do they remove? Does that predispose the tree because they're sticking their mouth parts in those roots? Are there other pathogens that then, because there's a wound there, get in there and may start to cause death of that root, and then eventually death of the plant? So there's a lot of things going on underground there that we don't see on a daily basis, but could contribute over time to a decline in a particular tree. So then they'll emerge. So we will have some opportunity to some signs to see when the population's coming and how big that population might be.
What will those signs be?
Well, they'll emerge from the soil, and then they'll finish. They'll pupate, so that larvae will pupate and change from a larvae to an adult. They'll cast that skin, and then the adults will be able to fly. They're like a big bomber.
Yeah. Yeah, they're big.
Yeah. So we'll see them.
Big, disgusting.
And then the males will start singing. So we'll hear them.
Mm-hmm. I don't like their song.
And then mating will occur. And then we'll start the process all over again.
Just like with humans.
Yes.
We fly around, we sing a little bit, and we expect the women to say, okay.
And probably the most damaging part is when the females lay their eggs.
Uh-huh.
That's where the damage comes in, and that's when we need to be prepared and protect plants, especially that have a lot of pencil diameter-sized wood. That's what they go for.
Okay.
So it's about that size because they've kind of got a big needle on the abdomen of their body, and it's very strong because it cuts right into the wood of the branch, and they'll lay a double row of eggs along a branch.
As they're extracting.
Yeah, so they'll physically damage that branch, and they lay enough pairs of eggs in there and the size of the branch, then that weakens that branch, and so it can snap off later. So we're trying to prevent that from happening or protect those plants that are within that size range. Now, on a bigger tree, usually it's not going to, completely damage it or ruin the tree. On smaller trees, especially things that might have been planted within the last 2, 3, 4 years, where you have more of that pencil-sized wood, and they could lay eggs on 3/4 of the branches, and especially fruit trees and things that can just ruin the whole tree, and you have to start over again.
I sort of have the feeling that we'll talk about this topic probably quite often.
When it comes back up, yep.
Later
in the spring.
As the spring progresses. My goodness gracious. Okay. He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. And that was scary. I'm going to go to the beach.
There's only so many times in your lifetime you'll go through this 17-year cycle, though.
But this is another of them.
It's another of them. We're adding them up.
Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160 and 101.1 FM.